Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Throw 5 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we're going to be talking about Auburn's decision to fire Hugh Freeze and where does the program go from here. And now, to go back to the beginning, Hugh Freeze was honestly a weird hire, to say the least. He was being successful coaching Liberty, but had an unceremonious exit from Ole Miss, and it seemed like he was able to get in with the right boosters at Auburn to kind of plant his name into the coaching search, and enough people were supporting him that he got the job. Now, he did do well at Ole Miss, but there ended up being a lot of recruiting violations, and it just seemed to be him hanging his hat on the fact that he beat Nick Saban a few times during Saban's reign of terror in the SEC. And that was quite some time ago. And the landscape of college football has changed, but it didn't seem like Hugh Freeze changed with it from a coaching perspective. Because if we look at the type of talent that Auburn had, there's a reason why they let him go now. So the final straw was a 10-3 loss to Kentucky, and Kentucky has been reeling all year. They are also on the verge of letting go of their head coach, Mark Stoops. The only reason I believe Mark Stoops hasn't been let go is because of the amount of money that's due to him initially. So let's take, for example, Jimbo Fisher. He had 70 plus $1 million in his buyout. However, not all a large portion was due up front. About $12 million was due up front, and then it's paid off over a period of 10 years or so, maybe less. It's like $7 million a year. Mark Stoops has to be paid basically like $36 million within like 30 days of him being fired. That's why he hasn't been fired. But back to the point at hand, Hugh Freeze, 15-19 record at Auburn, a 6-16 record in SEC play, just wasn't cutting it. He was recruiting at a high level where in his first two full cycles, because when he got hired in 2023, he obviously didn't have a full cycle of recruiting because of how late he was hired. He had the 6th overall recruiting class last year, and then the year before that, he had the number 8. And if you combine all the talent that is on the team, 247 Sports has him ranked as the 13th overall team in terms of talent on the roster. This is why they were expecting big things this year, because the only thing that was missing was a quarterback. You missed on last year's transfer. You bring in Jackson Arnold, the former number 1 QB out of Texas, a top 3 QB in the 2023 recruiting class, I believe. And he just wasn't really cutting it at Oklahoma. And he decided to get the change of scenery and was recruited to go to Auburn. Auburn's got a lot of explosive talent in terms of Cam Coleman. And it's just the offense was anemic. There was no explosive plays. Jackson Arnold seemed to lose his confidence in his ability as a thrower. He does have that dual threat nature. We saw it in the first few games, especially at Baylor, where he was able to provide a lot of success in marching the offense up and down the field with his dual threat ability. But as the season progressed, he started regressing as a passer. They benched him last game. He didn't start this game, and they still only scored 3 points against Kentucky. So, again, that was the final nail in the coffin. DJ Durkin, the defensive coordinator, is now the interim head coach. Durkin has been around, mostly in the Big Ten, but he's also, unfortunately, most famous for an incident that happened in Maryland when he was a coach there for 2 years, where during practice, one of his players, McNair, he collapsed, went to the hospital, and later died. Maryland conducted an investigation on it and then reinstated him later. But the backlash of the players involved with Jordan McNair's death forced the school's hand to fire him, and he's been kind of working his way back up since then. And there's, let's put it this way, with Auburn, there's a very active booster base there. They like to wield their power, they like to throw it around. For example, in 2021, a lot of them wanted Phil Steele, the former defensive coordinator at a lot of different places, including and Alabama, and he was at Auburn as well. They wanted him to be the head coach. The athletic director at the time said no and went with Boise State's Brian Raskins or Haskins. And that was an epic failure. And so, again, Freeze got himself situated with the right boosters. They pushed his name forward. That hasn't worked out as well either. Durkin has a lot of support within the booster base, which is why some people think he's one of two names that are the clear-cut favorites for this job. And he has a few games left to prove it. Would it be enough, though? Because it's already so late in the season. You got the Vandy game where you're at Vandy, who's still a top 15 team according to the AP poll. Then you've got the cupcake against Mercer, and then you're at home against Alabama. If he goes 2-1, let's say he finds a way to upset Vanderbilt, and they obviously beat Mercer and they lose to Alabama. But what if they're somewhat competitive against Alabama? And he goes 2-1 with a competitive loss to Alabama and being a top 15 team away. Is that enough to sway the athletic department to give DJ the job? Also, he is a good recruiter. He has shown that he can flip some people and that he's recruited at a high level for the defense. Will that be enough for Auburn to take the chance on him? I think DJ is currently number 2, unless he does something impressive in the next 3 games. I think the clear-cut favorite for this job is John Summerall, the current Tulane head coach. Now, John is a hot name right now. He's been linked to the LSU job, to the Florida job, basically any new Southern job he's linked to. He's currently leading Tulane to a 6-2 record. They were 9-5 last year with him. And in 2 years prior, he coached at Troy University, which is a school in Alabama, to a record of 23-4 in 2 years. He went 12-2 and 11-2. And according to sources, Summerall has been trying to position himself to be in the headlights, the viewpoint of Auburn, in case Hugh Freeze was going to be fired. And again, Hugh Freeze has kind of been on the warm seat coming into this season, and then it started getting hotter as the season progressed, where he was 1-5 in SEC play and wasn't really performing up to expectations. Even though, again, they've had some tough losses this year with the Oklahoma loss, where the refs, SEC, after the game said the refs didn't call proper penalties, and then the whole breaking the plane with Jackson Arnold against Georgia to go up 17-0 or to increase their lead significantly, and then just not doing anything in the second half. And the end of that half taking like 45 minutes or 30 minutes in real time to cover about 2-3 minutes of game time or less, and all the momentum swaying back in Georgia's favor and just dominating from there on. There were a few plays here and there, honestly, when Freeze says they were close. They were, but you're not paid to make it close at Auburn. Auburn's fan base, unfortunately, has, and I hate to put it this way, but they have a delusional sense of where they stand in the national stage. They have a lot of talent, yes, but they really have like that little brother syndrome to Alabama. You won the title in 2010. He played for another one in 2013. And outside of that, you've had a lot of downs instead of ups. This is going to be your third head coach in a span of about 4 years. Not healthy for a program to do that. And they just haven't found their footing in an age where Saban is dominated and Kirby has also allowed Georgia to become a dominant force nationally. And those are two of your biggest rivals. And unfortunately, you're insignificant in their eyes. Summerall would change that in people's eyes because he's an Alabama native and he's coached in the state before. He knows how to recruit it. He knows how to get teams to be a little more physical, but not be behind the eight ball when it comes to the advancing of offenses in today's day and age, where that seems like where Hugh Freeze came up short. He did not embrace a tempo style or just trying to cover up your shortcomings with a certain type of scheme. And he was unable to do that. And that's why we're here now having this podcast. Sources say that Summerall is clearly leaning more towards Auburn than even LSU or Florida because, again, he is the Alabama native. Auburn's more intriguing to him because it's almost on the same level as Florida now because, again, Florida has been incredibly inconsistent when it comes to their coaching and record-wise as well. You know, we've discussed it ad nauseum on this podcast. Billy Napier wasn't successful in terms of record on the field. Dan Mullen was developing talent. However, he wasn't recruiting at the level that they were expecting. And you had Jim McElwain win a few games and then was unceremoniously booted off as well. And then you had the Will Muschamp incident. So ever since Urban Meyer left, it's kind of been a recycling of coaches every 3 years. So it doesn't seem as consistent as people like it to believe, even though they've won multiple national championships this century. LSU, again, we'll dive into that in a separate podcast because we still haven't touched on the Brian Kelly firing. LSU is one of the premier jobs in the country. There's a lot of dysfunction now with that program, with the athletic director being let go, the governor of Louisiana stepping in and trying to figure out what they're going to do as a program in terms of letting go of their head coach, raising ticket prices, all these different things, saying that the board of directors is going to be in charge of finding a coach rather than the current athletic director / interim director who's now been promoted. So despite all the resources in the talent-rich area and the access they have to talent, it's kind of making coaches wonder if it's as good of a job as it's been viewed in the past. And we'll discuss that job more in the Brian Kelly podcast. But Summerall clearly is leaning more towards Auburn. He has positioned himself in front of the boosters to kind of put his name out there, and he's positioned himself in front of the university to say, hey, I'm interested. Sources say that if he's offered the job, he would take it. And again, if DJ Durkin doesn't really go out of his way to improve the outlook of this team over the next 3 games, I don't see how John Summerall isn't the pick. Again, he's a native son. He's won in the state. He's shown throughout his multiple stops in the SEC, in Kentucky, for example, recruiting multiple blue chip prospects and high level blue chip prospects as well. He was doing the same at Ole Miss as well when he was there. He's shown he can recruit at that level. And he's actually building a good program as well in Tulane, keeping the green wave at the expectations they've been at in the past previously, where they've been successful over the past few years, and he's kept that momentum going. And again, he showed you what he's able to do at Troy, which was struggling before him, and in 2 seasons, it became a pretty dominant force. There's a lot of check marks, a lot of positives that are involved with Auburn and Summerall. So again, I'm not sure if I should dive into the other names that have been thrown out there because I'm not sure it's going to get past these two. Again, you have certain individuals like a Brent Key at Georgia Tech, a Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. Those two individuals have been thrown out a lot for these SEC jobs or these jobs that are opening up throughout the country because Brent Key has really brought back Georgia Tech. And Kenny Dillingham, despite the mess that was left to him, they had a college football playoff berth last year and have been very competitive this year despite Sam Levitt's injuries piling up and now he's out for the season. He still shows the ability to go out and win games. But again, those are those guys' alma mater. Kenny Dillingham got his degree from, he went to school at Arizona State. Brent Key is from Georgia Tech. It's going to be hard to pull those guys to a job like Auburn, where Auburn hasn't really been successful over the past 10, almost 15 years, if you don't include the 2013 national championship run, where they made it against FSU in the last BCS game. It may not be as intriguing to try and take that jump for an Auburn job. Now, again, maybe for a Florida job, even though, again, they have been inconsistent, that might be more appealing. Same thing with the LSU job. Auburn's a little tougher to crack. You've also had the obvious players like James Franklin being thrown out there. Jimbo Fisher, again, is campaigning hard, saying he wants to have another college football job. He's made it well known. Would Auburn be intrigued with that? I'm not sure. Do you go diving back into a former SEC coach who also won a national championship at Florida State, but didn't really perform well with all the resources that he got at Texas A&M? Again, that's why I don't really want to dive into those as much because I do think there's a clear cut 1 and 2 in John Summerall and DJ Durkin, and I don't think it goes beyond that. I don't think this school wants to complicate it as much. There is a lot of job openings between Penn State, LSU, Florida, Oklahoma State, and again, like when I say Oklahoma State, obviously Auburn is a level above Oklahoma State. No disrespect to Oklahoma State, but there's a lot of appeal of coaching in the SEC, having the SEC money, and having the SEC boosters. And when I say SEC money, that's the money extracted out of ESPN from the TV contracts. It's clear that there's two major conferences. It's the Big Ten and the SEC, who get a boatload of money from Fox and ESPN. A lot of these group of 5 coaches, a lot of these Big 12 ACC coaches who could have the ability to jump are in all likelihood going to, as long as it's a somewhat stable program, which is kind of weird saying it because they obviously fired their head coach. So how stable can a program be? But again, is it going to take a lot of effort to get LSU to where it should be? I don't think so. Does it take a lot of effort to get Penn State to where it should be? It might be a rough year next year because you're got the portal hard to get certain talents in there because you're losing a lot of, the QB, running backs, all that stuff. But Penn State is a very stable program. And unfortunately, when you look at these Arizona States, have Kenny Dillingham or even like a Manny Diaz at Duke that have been successful in the ACC. Are they there for long because a Big Ten job or an SEC job might come calling? And the money and the resources make it very, very tempting to jump ship because there's honestly 2 levels in this sport right now. It's the Big Ten and the SEC and then everybody else. It's sad to say, but in totality, the ACC and the Big 12 are closer to group of 5 than they are to the Big Ten and the SEC in a lot of people's eyes. Is that true? Probably not. Again, you have some talented teams, but that's neither here nor there. So again, my top 2 candidates, I think number 1, John Summerall, number 2, DJ Durkin. And we'll see where Auburn goes from here because, again, it's a madhouse this season with all the firings that have been happening and the types of positions that are opening up. Auburn is still an appealing job despite the negatives that have been brought up by me. But it's again, the SEC is different now because you have Texas and Oklahoma in there. You have this advent of NIL and revenue sharing with the players. Vanderbilt was always viewed as a doormat in the SEC, and now they're a winning program. And again, is that sustainable? We don't know. They could go back to being a 7-5 team as soon as Diego Pava retires, as soon as he graduates, and maybe they don't find another transfer quarterback, and they won't have the ability to put up points that they've been putting up recently. And that doesn't allow them to have that physical identity that they've adopted over the past few years. We don't know. But again, you got to realize a lot of these programs, or LSU's looking at Vanderbilt, a lot of these boosters that have been around for decades, they don't view Vanderbilt in its current state. They view Vanderbilt historically being a mediocre team and how they're beating some of the blue bloods in the SEC. You're looking at Missouri, a former Big 12 program that's performed consistently over the past few years. They've had a few up and downs and whatnot, but they've had more 10-win seasons than Auburn has in quite some time. The SEC is a different beast now. College football in general is a different beast. With the evening out of the talent pool, a lot of people thought that NIL would make the rich richer. It turns out it's given opportunities for the talent to disperse across the country rather than being concentrated in the Ohio States, Alabamas, and Georgias. So can Summerall or Durkin navigate those waters? We'll find out. That being said, we're wrapping this episode up. We're going to try and do a Brian Kelly being fired by LSU one shortly. And we're going to have to review the Florida State and games over the past weekend and probably do a temperature check on both programs because unfortunately I haven't been able to record over the past few weeks. And we got to do a lot of catching up because it's November in football, folks. And November in college football is always a crazy month. So we're going to start pumping out the content again. Have no fear. You guys know the drill when we get to the end of the podcast. You can find us on YouTube, 305 Insights. Like, subscribe, follow, do all that stuff there. Apple Podcasts, subscribe there. Rate us 5 stars. Turn those notifications on. And you can find us on Spotify as well. Again, however you may be listening, we thank you for listening here. It's much appreciated. Thanks for listening. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.